The Poconos Mountains are known for their serene beauty, especially during the holiday season, but for one couple, their cozy Christmas getaway turned into a nightmare. What they experienced inside that cabin was far from peaceful. It all started as a perfect plan. My partner and I wanted to escape the chaos of the holidays, just the two of us, in a remote cabin in the Poconos. We arrived on Christmas Eve, the snow falling gently as we drove up the winding forest road. The cabin was beautiful, straight out of a postcard, wooden beams, a stone fireplace, and a backdrop of dense, silent woods. It was exactly what we'd hoped for, or so we thought. As we unloaded the car, I couldn't shake an odd feeling. The air felt heavy, almost oppressive, and the silence of the forest was unsettling, but I brushed it off. Inside, the cabin was even cozier than the pictures online. A Christmas tree stood in the corner, its lights twinkling warmly. We lit a fire and settled in, ready to relax. But almost immediately, strange things began to happen. The first was the cold spot. No matter how high we turned up the heat, there was one corner of the living room that remained icy cold. It wasn't near a window or a vent. It made no sense. Then the lights started flickering. At first, we thought it was just a wiring issue, but as the evening went on, it became harder to ignore. It was as if the cabin was trying to communicate. Later that evening, as we sat by the fire, we heard it, a faint creaking sound like footsteps coming from the second floor. We froze. The cabin was supposed to be empty, and we'd locked the door. Maybe it's the wood settling, I said, trying to reassure both of us, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. The noises grew louder as the night went on. At one point, it sounded like someone or something was dragging a heavy object across the floor above us. We decided to check it out. Armed with a flashlight, we climbed the creaky wooden staircase. The air grew colder with every step. The upstairs hallway was dark and silent. As we moved toward the bedrooms, the flashlight beam caught something, a shadow darting across the far wall. "Did you see that?" my partner whispered, their voice trembling. We stood there, frozen, as a low guttural sound echoed down the hall. "It wasn't human. We need to leave," I whispered, but my partner insisted we check one of the bedrooms. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a room covered in dust as if it hadn't been touched in years. That's when we saw it. In the corner of the room stood a figure, translucent and faintly glowing. It was a man dressed in old-fashioned clothing, his face twisted in sorrow. He raised a hand as if to reach out to us, but before we could react, he vanished. That was it. We weren't staying another second. We grabbed our coats and ran out into the freezing night. As we sped down the snow-covered road, I glanced back at the cabin. In the window, I saw the figure again, watching us leave. The next day, we contacted the rental agency to report what had happened. That's when we learned the cabin's history. Years ago, a family had lived there. One Christmas, tragedy struck. A father lost his life in an accident while trying to decorate the cabin for the holidays. Since then, guests had reported strange occurrences, cold spots, flickering lights, and even sightings of the man's ghost. It all made sense now. The cabin wasn't just haunted, it was a place of sorrow, a memory frozen in time. We'll never forget that Christmas. What was supposed to be a peaceful getaway turned into a chilling reminder that some places never let go of their past. The holiday season is a time for relaxation and celebration, but for one group of friends, their Christmas getaway turned into a terrifying ordeal. What should have been a joyful stay at an Airbnb became a chilling reminder that not all is as it seems. It was December 24th, Christmas Eve. My friends and I had rented a cozy Airbnb cabin in the mountains to escape the hustle and bustle of the city. The cabin was everything we had hoped for: charming, secluded, and decorated for the holidays. Twinkling lights adorned the porch, and a small Christmas tree sat by the fireplace inside. We spent the first evening cooking, laughing, and exchanging gifts. The snow fell softly outside, blanketing the ground in white. It felt like the perfect Christmas until everything changed. Around midnight, as the festivities began to wind down, we started noticing odd things. The first was the sound. Faint footsteps, almost imperceptible, seemed to come from the back of the house. "Did you hear that?" one of my friends asked, breaking the silence. We dismissed it as the sound of the house settling. But then came the second sign: the front door. One of my friends swore she had locked it earlier, but now it was slightly ajar. The cold air from outside seeped in, making the living room feel suddenly uninviting. Feeling uneasy, we decided to do a quick sweep of the house. Armed with our phones as flashlights, we checked every room, but nothing seemed out of place. Then we heard it, a loud thud coming from the upstairs bedroom. We froze. My heart pounded as we slowly crept upstairs. The door to the bedroom was closed, but light spilled out from underneath it. One of my friends whispered, "Who's in there?" Summoning courage, we pushed the door open, and there he was. A man stood in the corner of the room, his back to us. He was disheveled, wearing torn clothes, and clutching something in his hand. "Who are you?" one of us shouted. He turned slowly, his eyes wild and unfocused. He didn't say a word. Panic set in. We bolted down the stairs and locked ourselves in the living room. The man didn't follow us, but we could hear him moving around upstairs, his heavy footsteps echoing through the cabin. Minutes felt like hours as we waited for the police to arrive. When they finally did, we ran outside to meet them, desperate to feel safe again. The officers entered the house and found the man still upstairs. He had no weapons, but his presence alone was terrifying enough. The police determined that the man had somehow gained access to the Airbnb through a basement window. He was likely homeless and seeking shelter, but that didn't make the experience any less terrifying. We learned later that the cabin had no security cameras, and the lock on the basement window was broken, something we wish we'd known before. The incident left us shaken, a stark reminder of how vulnerable we can be, even in the most idyllic settings. This Christmas, we learned that safety should never be taken for granted. No matter how perfect a place might seem, always take extra precautions, because you never know who might be watching. Christmas, a time for joy, laughter, and warmth. But for one group of friends, Their holiday retreat turned into a nightmare they would never forget. What started as a peaceful stay in an Airbnb cabin became a haunting experience with no explanation. It was supposed to be the perfect Christmas escape. The 5 of us had rented a cozy Airbnb cabin deep in the woods, miles away from the noise and chaos of the city. The cabin was stunning. A crackling fireplace in the living room, a grand Christmas tree adorned with ornaments, and wide windows showcasing the view of the snow-covered forest. We arrived on Christmas Eve, ready for a weekend of relaxation, board games, and good food. Everything seemed perfect, but in hindsight, maybe it was too perfect. The first day passed without incident. We cooked a hearty dinner, exchanged gifts, and stayed up late, chatting by the fire. But that night, around 3 a.m., we were jolted awake by a loud bang. At first, it sounded like something had fallen, maybe a loose shelf or a tree branch hitting the roof. But when we checked, nothing was out of place. It's probably just the wind, one of my friends said. We laughed it off and went back to bed. The next night, the noises returned, but this time they were louder and more persistent. The banging came from the walls, first near the living room, then moving toward the bedrooms. It was as if something or someone was circling the cabin. It's probably animals, I suggested, though I didn't fully believe it. Still, we checked outside with flashlights and found nothing, no footprints in the snow, no sign of wildlife. The noises continued, punctuated by faint knocking on the windows. By the third night, we were on edge. None of us had slept well, and the tension was palpable. We contacted the Airbnb host, who assured us the cabin was safe and suggested it might be raccoons or other wildlife. But that didn't explain the heavy, deliberate banging. We decided to call the local authorities. A sheriff's deputy came to inspect the property, but they found no evidence of tampering, no tracks, and no signs of an intruder. If this keeps up, give us another call, the deputy said before leaving, but their reassurance did little to calm our nerves. That night, the disturbances reached their peak. The banging was louder than ever, and now it seemed to come from all directions: walls, windows, even the roof. One of my friends swore they saw a shadowy figure through the window, but when we rushed to check, there was no one there. At this point, we were terrified. We huddled together in the living room, too scared to sleep, jumping at every creak and groan the cabin made. By morning, we had had enough. We packed up our things and left the cabin, cutting our trip short. The host apologized profusely, offering a full refund, but it didn't matter. The experience had shaken us to our core. We never found out what caused the disturbances. No animals, no intruders, no logical explanation, just the chilling memory of those relentless noises in the night. Sometimes the scariest things are those we can't explain. Was it animals, a prank, or something far more sinister? We'll never know. But one thing is certain, we'll think twice before booking another cabin in the woods.